Welcome to the Brand and Market Podcast, where branding clarity meets marketing strategy. I'm your host, Allie Haney, founder of Brand and Market, a boutique agency dedicated to helping small businesses craft intentional brands and effective marketing plans. Each week, I share practical tips and insights to help you, especially those of you in real estate-related industries, build a standout brand to attract your brand's biggest fans. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of the Brand and Market Podcast. I actually started writing this episode back in August of last year, believe it or not. I had the best intentions of incorporating a current event into my content plan, and then life really happened. We ended up moving. I went through a rebrand in my business, but for today's episode, we're going to take it all the way back to August 2024. Which is when Post Malone came out with his country album, F1 Trillion. That's what today's episode is all about. I have always been a huge fan of Post Malone, since his first single came out, probably a decade ago. And I have been following him pretty much ever since. On Spotify, I even created a playlist that is literally called All Posty in capital letters. And it's the playlist that I listen to when the kids are not in the car. Sometimes I wonder what people think when I'm blasting Post Malone in my 4Runner. They just see this 30-something-year-old mom at a stoplight playing her favorite single off of beer bongs and Bentleys. But, I digress. I'm not going to change it, so here we are. Even if you don't know anything about Post Malone, though, you would probably quickly recognize him once you saw him. He is covered in tattoos, including his face. He has this bushy beard and shiny teeth. And when I say shiny teeth, I legit mean the grills across his teeth. There's multiple songs where he references how much money he has put into his teeth. It's not quite the type of person that you would picture when you think of country music. He started his musical career in the rap/R&B/hip hop genres, and he often blurred a lot of lines there, especially when he had his album that kind of went over towards the rock side of things. But he never officially stepped into the country music arena. When I think of an artist who's done a similar thing that Post Malone has just done in the last year or so, the main name that comes to mind is Taylor Swift. She's the one that I can immediately think of that has crossed genre lines and done it really well. And I actually did an episode on Taylor Swift and how she's built her personal brand. So if you're a Swiftie, you should definitely go check out episode 2. But this genre transition really kind of catapults Post Malone, in my opinion, into a top tier of artists because only a few people have really been able to do that. This transition overall is it's not an easy one to make that cross-genre switch and be welcomed with open arms, not only by the other artists in the genre, but being accepted by your fans who were expecting a certain type of music from you. It's just a really impressive thing to do on both sides. Like I said, I'm a huge Posty fan, so I've been following him for a while, especially as he made this transition, and I believe there are 3 things that he did to be able to make his country album a success, and that's what we're going to dive into on this episode today. So the first thing that I think he did that was really smart of him was releasing 3 songs from the country album prior to the actual release of the whole album. And that warmed up his audience, the existing audience that he had in all of those other R&B, hip hop, rap genres, to what was going to be his new sound. So let's dive into this a little bit further. So we often get an idea as an entrepreneur and we want to execute it immediately, or we want to debut this new project we've been working so hard on once it's perfect. But he didn't do that. He didn't wait until the album was complete. He actually released the first single off the album in early May before the full album was released in mid-August. So almost 3 months prior, he dropped a song with one of the biggest names in country music at the time. That first song from his country album that was released was called I Had Some Help with Morgan Wallen. It ended up being one of the songs of the summer. And I wholeheartedly agree. Caleb and I were fans of it from the moment they released a little teaser of it all the way back in early spring. And speaking of that teaser, let's look at the timeline during which they actually slowly hyped up this track by teasing the audience with its release. This goes all the way back to March 20th of 2024. So that's when Post Malone teasingly made an Instagram post with the caption, "Let's get the real mix this time," and tagged Morgan Wallen, who is the person that he collaborated with on this song, I Had Some Help. And I only vaguely remember this, but like back in December of 23, I think there was an unplanned Instagram post at like 4 a.m. from Morgan Wallen that had like an earlier version or iteration of the song, and Post definitely like lovingly, but still called him out on that. I'm pretty sure that probably was induced by alcohol and just overall over imbibing. He was really excited about the song and posted on Instagram, but it quickly got taken down. And the official teaser, I guess, was in March of 2024. So they were working on it, but they still released it before it was actually like perfected. And that piqued the audience's interest. At least it piqued mine. But let's fast forward to April 25th of 2024. Post Malone dropped another Instagram post that had just a teaser of the song, pretty much just the chorus, with the caption, "They say teamwork makes the dream work," which is a main lyric in the chorus of the song, and tags Morgan yet again. So I know I'm really using like a magnifying glass on this launch schedule, but it all plays into how they made the hype for the overall full country album. Okay, so after that teaser on April 25th, Morgan and Posty play the full version of the song publicly on stage at Stagecoach, the music festival, on April 28th, 3 days after Post teases it, but before it's actually released as a single. So they teased it, played it in real life, but still haven't released it yet. So, of course, there are TikToks being posted from the live event everywhere with captions like, "This is the Morgan Wallen and Post Malone moment we have all been waiting for," because we had already been waiting for it for a month already. And then finally, they dropped the single on May 10th and the crowd goes wild. The like full crowd, not just the crowd at Stagecoach. They released a portion of the first single prior to releasing the full song to tease just that single. But at this point, the country album release date was not even announced yet. In fact, it was a whole month before the album release date was even announced. They hyped up the hype up. This is genius. On June 18th, he announced officially that he was going to be releasing a full country album titled F1 Trillion on August 16th. So at this point, his audience had gotten a taste of country version of Posty. Now we know that he will be releasing a full country album, and we have a date on which we can expect it. Then he hits us with 2 more singles. Let's look at the next 2 single release dates. The second single was Pour Me a Drink with Blake Shelton. This single was released on June 21st, so just a few days after he told the world he was going to be releasing the country album. And the third was Guy for That with Luke Combs. And this was released on July 26th, a month later. None of this was by accident. This timeline was purposeful and strategic. He was priming his audience, which up to this point had been a vast majority of hip hop, R&B, and pop listeners, to love and accept and expect this new version of Post Malone. So genius in that launch schedule. Are you feeling stuck when it comes to your branding or marketing strategy? Do you have a million ideas but no clear direction on where to start? Then it sounds like a Power Hour session would be perfect for you. This is a focused one-on-one video call designed to tackle your biggest branding or marketing challenges. Here's how it works. You schedule a call, share some of your business details and any burning questions you have ahead of time. Then during our session, we dive straight into solutions. No fluff, no generic advice, just tailored strategies that work for you and your business. Whether you're a realtor looking to stand out in a crowded market, a short-term rental owner creating a repeat guest experience, or a builder needing clarity on your messaging, the Power Hour is designed to help you walk away with actionable steps to grow your brand. Are you ready to take the guesswork out of your branding and marketing? Let's tackle it together. Visit the link in the show notes to book your Power Hour session today, and let's turn your ideas into intentional action. Second thing, in my opinion, that made this album a success was the collaborations with other huge names in the country genre. I'm going to go in order of the tracks on the album. Otherwise, I might miss a huge name that he collaborated with. Okay, here goes. He collaborated with Tim McGraw, Hank Williams Jr., Morgan Wallen, Dolly Parton, Brad Paisley, Luke Combs, Lainey Wilson, Jelly Roll, Ernest, Sierra Farrell, Chris Stapleton, Hardy, and Billy Strings. That is 14 different collaborations. So actually, it was 15 collaborations with 14 artists. Those artists span multiple generations of country music, from Hank Williams Jr. and Dolly Parton to Tim McGraw and Blake Shelton to Morgan Wallen, Luke Combs, and Lainey Wilson and Jelly Roll. These are arguably some of the biggest names in country music at each generational level, and he backed them all on this album. It was almost like his version of social proof. He was telling his audience and the audience of the current country music listeners, hey, if these leaders in this genre accept me, you should too. I mean, damn, if Dolly isn't an endorsement, I don't know who would be. I honestly wish I could have been a fly on the wall for those conversations with those artists. I'm so curious how the collaboration conversation started when this hip hop / rap artist that's tatted from like head to toe, has painted fingernails and grills on his teeth, smoking a cigarette, holding a Bud Light, approached Dolly Parton to do a song together. I know. I just like in my mind, she just squeezed him and called him sugar and told him to picture with like the best he's got. Like that's how the conversation went in my head. One thing that I noticed about all these collaborations though, is that there is no competition at the top of the industry, only community and collaboration. Those conversations were all probably very amicable and welcoming conversations, not only about the collaboration itself, but also a welcome into the genre overall. I think it's really cool to see an entire genre basically rally around an outsider to welcome him in. That's not always the case, so it's really exciting to see. The last thing I want to mention in terms of the collaborations piece is that this was not only a genius move to be accepted into the country music industry, it also was so smart because he was able to leverage the audiences of all of those other artists when he launched his album. Let's touch on the audiences that he reached by leveraging the audiences of those other artists. So, like I said, there were 15 collaborations with 14 different artists on the first country album. I'm going to go through those artists and tell you each of their Instagram followings. And just keep in mind that this is Instagram only. It's not on any other platform. This is where I pull these numbers as of today. Tim McGraw has 3.5 million followers. Morgan Wallen, 8.2 million. Dolly Parton, 7.3 million. Hank Williams Jr. coming in the lowest at 329,000. Blake Shelton, 6.8 million. Luke Combs, 7.1 million. Brad Paisley, 2 million. Lainey Wilson, 3.1 million. Jelly Roll, 3.9 million. Ernest, 541,000. Hardy, 1.5 million. Sierra Farrell, 589,000. Chris Stapleton, 2.7 million. And Billy Strings rounds it out with 846,000. Altogether, those audiences equal 48.3 million people. Now, of course, you can argue that some of those audiences probably overlap. After all, they are all mostly country music artists. However, there are subsections of those country listeners that are targeted based off of the artists, like we touched on earlier. For example, those who are listening to Hank Williams Jr. are not necessarily the same listeners that are listening to, let's say, Lainey Wilson. So Posty was pooling all of those audiences because most, if not all, shared with their audiences about their collaboration with him. This legitimized him within the industry, like we mentioned before, and drove up streams because he immediately gained access to, let's round down and say 40 million additional listeners that may have not have heard of him before, especially within this genre specifically. Okay, final genius marketing ploy that Posty used during his transition to country music was releasing the first portion of the album with those 14 collaborations. But on that 18-track album, only 3 of those songs were his solo country songs. But then hours later, he followed it up with F1 Trillion long bed version that contained 9 more solo songs. So the purpose of this release schedule, in my opinion, was to leave his audience wanting more songs with just him on the track. When that first part of the album dropped, we loved it. We ate it up. We loved Country Posty with all of his collabs. But we were like, I wish I had more solo songs so we could hear his voice as a country artist a little bit clearer. Then bam, by mid-morning, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, it was like 10 a.m. or 12 p.m. Like by noon, we had 9 more solo songs that we could binge. He primed us to want more. Then he delivered the goods we were expecting. This was genius because he was anticipating what his ideal listener would want, need, and desire. He was able to surprise and delight his listeners because he sprinkled in something a little extra there at the end. Overall, his transition to country music was methodical, strategic, and, in my opinion, genius. Few artists have pivoted genres, putting Post Malone, like I said, in that same category, at least in my eyes, as Taylor Swift. He did it flawlessly. Now, all of this is well and good for Posty because he's a big name artist and can do whatever the hell he wants, right? Right, but it can also apply to you and your small business anytime you want to introduce a new offering or even make a major pivot. Let me tell you how. First, prime your audience prior to your launch. Make your audience excited about the new offer or the new service. If you do everything behind the scenes, then launch with no warning, this entirely new service or business is going to feel out of context. It's going to catch them off guard. And ultimately, you're likely going to get crickets. Trust me, because I know this from experience. You want to prime your audience with pre-launch content so that you can, by showing them what's to come, by teasing the offer and letting them into a little behind the scenes of what you're doing and creating. That way, they know what to expect when it's time to buy. Second, collaborate with others within your network. Find others in your industry that have complementary but not competing services. Leverage their audiences because they've already established trust with them. This is also the basis of influencer marketing, which we discussed at length in the previous episode, episode 36. I'll link that in the show notes. Third, deliver the goods. Then surprise and delight them with an extra treat. In the wedding world, we were always told to underpromise and overdeliver, and that's exactly what Posty did and exactly what you can do too. Think in terms of maybe it's a closing gift when they go to sign their closing documents, or something as simple as a handwritten note after they've settled into their new home. Let's learn from Post Malone and his transition to country music, his genius in priming his current audience, leveraging others' audience in the new area he was entering, as well as surprising and delighting all his listeners, is a true testament into his marketing genius. If you like this episode and want more business case studies, check out episodes 10 and 20 for more. That's all I got this week. So until next week, here's to clarity, intention, and growth in your brand and your market. You just completed another episode of the Brand and Market Podcast. If you found this helpful, please rate, review, and subscribe to help others find this show and so that you never miss an episode. Don't forget to take a look at the show notes for all the resources mentioned today. See you next Wednesday, and as always, I'm here cheering you on as you build your dream brand and business.